welcome to the Brandon Ayuk edition of the Here We Go podcast. I am Trent Gang, and I have actively tried to avoid this conversation as much as possible. But I feel like we saw a change yesterday, and I don't think it was just the fact that Ayuk didn't show up to camp. So let me run through some things and why I think this situation is taking a bit of a turn. I'm not saying it's definitely happening, but I want to lay out some facts that hopefully bring some light to where I see the situation, because I have been one of the few people who have been saying pretty consistently that this thing is not happening. The reason I've said that is because to me it's never made sense for the San Francisco 49ers to trade Brandon Ayuk. In my opinion, he's the second best player on their offense behind Christian McCaffrey. He's kind of the catalyst of making sure that offense goes. Before McCaffrey got there, they were still a good offense. He just made them a lot better. Without Brandon Ayuk in the lineup, with or without McCaffrey, this offense takes an obvious hit. So when I look at that, I have to wonder, what would it take for an organization just to say, you know what, you mean a lot to us, but I'd rather not pay you. We're just going to ship you out of town if you can find a trade partner. They do have a cap situation to where they can't pay everyone. They also have the best left tackle in football who's holding out right now. Trent Williams has already missed games throughout his career. He's gotten fined, and he's been completely okay with it. He's a guy you can take seriously. He will do it again. And I'll say this team cannot afford to lose both guys for any period of time. So I'm not sure that they should have been motivated throughout this process. And they've given way more leverage to Ayuk than I would have if I were in their shoes. They allowed the hold-in to continue. They've allowed this thing to drag out all the way up until here about a week away from the regular season. And finally they say, and this came from both John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, they expected him to be at practice yesterday. They said enough is enough. At some point, you're under contract. You have to come play football. Well, Ayuk called their bluff. He flat out said, I'm not coming. And he didn't show up yesterday. But the turning point to me was the frustration I saw coming from John Lynch when he did his press conference and took questions. There's obvious frustration there. Obvious frustration. And of course, we'll never know what exactly is going on behind the scenes. But when you see a guy that is that frustrated, who's a former player, and most GMs have a pretty large ego to begin with, at some point, you start to wonder, is this damaging his ego to where now it's no longer worth it to John Lynch to make this thing happen with Brandon Ayuk? Are they getting frustrated enough to say, we're done dealing with you? Pittsburgh wants you. They can have you. That to me is the turning point in this whole saga. Because it was going to have to take something spectacular, whether that's a good spectacular or bad, for them to want to move on from this guy. Because he's under contract right now. They have 2 franchise tag opportunities. And after next year, Debo's basically an $8 million dead money hit. You could easily trade him after next season. I would have signed Brandon Ayuk from day one. I'd have paid him if I were San Francisco. Get this thing done before Justin Jefferson got his money, and now CeeDee Lamb got his money. Because you know the Bengals and Jamar Chase are going to be really, really close to getting that one done, and he's going to be another guy pushing this thing to $35 million. So all of a sudden, the $30 million that Brandon Ayuk wants, I bet you he moves that number. The problem for Brandon Ayuk is that I don't believe the Steelers or the 49ers have any interest in paying him more than $30 million. It was reported that the Steelers came in just under $28 million. If they would have got him for that, that's starting to look more and more like a bargain deal. But I can't imagine that that's going to be the bottom line price now. It just feels like he's going to want somewhere in the range of 32. He sees himself in that top receiver category. I don't think he's there. I think I had him ranked 8th. So I'm not trying to downplay his talents because he is a very good player. And to be perfectly honest, I've said all along, I would love to have him, Pittsburgh. I just don't love what you have to give up to get him. Now, my hope is the reported second and third round picks that Pittsburgh were willing to trade for Ayuk are not in the 2025 draft, that at least one of them is in the 2026 draft. More than likely, it would have to be the third round pick. But we're a rebuilding team. You need draft capital. So that's why I'm hoping it's not going to be our second and third round picks in this upcoming draft. It's looking more and more likely like Brandon Ayuk is going to get $30 million somewhere. It's just a matter of if either of the two teams involved right now are willing to pay it. And what does he do if neither want to pay it? Is he going to sit out the entire year? Then he starts his contract all over again next offseason? I think it's foolish if he does. We don't see players missing full seasons for non-injury related things and it working out somewhere down the line. It just never seems to work out from a player standpoint. I understand they're trying to leverage with what little leverage players have in today's NFL. But why waste valuable years in your prime over a contract dispute? I do think this thing is turning a bit of a corner. Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport are back talking about this. When those guys get involved, I start taking it seriously. I think the team and the organization is getting frustrated with Ayuk. I think they're done. I think they're kind of at their wits' end. And it feels like this thing's starting to become a waiting game. And I wonder, and this is pure speculation, I wonder if Omar Khan knows something. Of course, he's going to know more than the rest of us. I mean, he's the guy, right? And here's why I say that. He's passed on all of the initial rounds of wide receivers in free agency. We basically went diving for scraps to pick up guys like Van Jefferson, Scotty Miller, Quez Watkins. We drafted a guy that we think fits really, really well in the slot, but does not fill out well on the outside. in Roman Wilson, at least not now. So don't take that as me saying he can't develop into that guy, because he absolutely has that opportunity. But early on in his career, probably his first 2 seasons, he's not going to be an outside wide receiver. But he is a perfect fit in the slot. That's all he's done. Then we see a guy like Jahan Dotson get traded for very little compensation, I might add. The Steelers weren't even reportedly interested. Now, I don't think Dotson was a good fit. He was another undersized guy that I really didn't want to see in this offense, because at some point we need a guy with a different body type and different build who can block, because we are going to be a running team. We need a wide receiver on the outside that can block. Van Jefferson's not a good blocker, I might add you, which is why this whole thing has been quite puzzling this entire process. Then cut down day comes. Now, as of right now, we've made 0 waiver claims. And there were a number of wide receivers that I think you would have expected this organization to be interested in. Noah Brown was a guy that I was very, very high on, that I thought would have fit perfectly in the type of offense that we are going to run here. I thought for sure this team would try to go get him, and that just never kind of happened. There was no waiver claim, to my knowledge. Of course, another team could have had a higher claim. Maybe the Steelers were in on him and they just didn't get him. Tim Patrick. There was so much talk going around about him the last couple of days. Nothing to go get a guy like that. Dubois from Green Bay went to a team, from what I heard today, that had a lower waiver claim spot than the Steelers. So obviously we didn't make a claim on him. We've let everybody go. And from all accounts, on the outside looking in, it doesn't appear that we made any attempts whatsoever to go get it, guys. So it really feels like Omar Khan and the organization is all in on Brandon Ayuk. Why would he be doing that? Why would a guy who's such a savvy guy with numbers be all in on what some of us had felt like was kind of a Hail Mary trade attempt? The only thing I can think is that, once again, Omar Khan knows something we don't. He has to feel confident that either we don't need a wide receiver 2, because we're not throwing the ball that much anyway, or, and I think this is the more likely scenario, he not only thinks he's getting Brandon Ayuk, he knows he's getting Brandon Ayuk. It's just a matter of time. I hope he's right, because this wide receiver room is just not good, and doing absolutely nothing to upgrade it seems a bit insane to me. I mean, there were some low cost, low compensation, or not even compensation, just waiver claims type guys out there that we could have went and got that would have been clear upgrades. I think Noah Brown would have been the wide receiver 2 if he came here. I really do. It's puzzling to see that we've not made any attempt to get any of these guys. And that's why in my mind, I'm selling myself on the fact that Omar Khan absolutely is certain he's getting Brandon Ayuk. Not a matter of if, but a matter of when. And I thought it was crazy the entire time, to be quite honest with you. And if anybody's listened to me talk, if anybody has read anything I've put out there on Twitter, I've been laughing at people saying there's no way, this isn't happening. Now, of course, I'm doing it to people who are really just kind of like putting it out there. Oh, yeah, my sources tell me. Come on, dude. You're a guy on Twitter. You don't have sources. But at the same time, it looks like this is becoming a reality sooner rather than later. And I'm basing this mostly off of the frustrations I saw from John Lynch. The obvious frustrations that you can see on a guy like Kyle Shanahan's face when he's answering these questions and kind of laughing it off, but you could tell it like irritates him that he's consistently being asked day in and day out about the Ayuk saga. And make no mistake, this thing has become a saga. It is one of the wildest things I've seen that I can remember, especially recently. I mean, for Steeler fans, the closest thing we've seen to something like this was the Le'Veon Bell situation. And I'm just so confused by the way this whole process has played out. It seems as though teams are trying to meet Ayuk's demands. I wonder if the guy even knows what he wants to do. And now it seems like he knows for sure. He wants out of town. To be told he needs to show up, and to not show up yesterday was this clear slap in the face to the organization for not paying him sooner. And it seems like he is pretty much done. This thing has started to get ugly. That's another reason why I feel like we're starting to see the end coming really, really soon and getting a resolution to this whole thing. Now, up until a couple days ago, I was still saying it ain't happening. But after seeing John Lynch in the interview, he's done. You can tell he's done. He's done with the situation. And it makes you think at some point the organization is going to give Brandon Ayuk some type of an ultimatum that says, look, bud, either you're going to come to the table, sign the paperwork, you're going to play out the last year of your contract, or the organization is just going to say, you know what, it's just not worth it anymore. We're done. So John Lynch's ego is going to go a long way to determining if the end is near for the Brandon Ayuk saga. And based on what I saw yesterday, I think it is. I think for the first time, I'm coming around to the idea that this thing is more likely than not to happen. Like I said, I got as high as 60% thinking it was a possibility. At one point, I was really kind of teetering on whether or not it was more of a 50-50 thing. I kind of gave it a 60-40% chance the Steelers land him, and then everything died down. But now where we're at, with him not showing up after being told he needs to show up to practice yesterday, John Lynch's reaction to that, and then saying we'll handle that later if he doesn't show, when he was asked a follow-up question. He wasn't saying that in a very positive light, and it sounds like he's kind of just, like I said, he's at his wit's end. So I thought this thing was going to be wrapped up last weekend. Clearly, I was wrong. Clearly, this thing's going to continue to go on until somebody's ego gives up and they just break and just say, listen, I'm done. For the first time, I feel like that's breaking the Steelers' way. I still wouldn't pay this guy more than $30 million. I thought $28 million was the right price tag when we offered it, based on his production and based on the type of player he is. Now with the CeeDee Lamb contract coming through, probably going to push that to $30 million. It's quite unfortunate. But is it worth hassling over $1.5 million, maybe $2 million to get a guy like Brandon Ayuk? I don't think the team needs him, to be quite frank, because our offense is not going to be that explosive, but it's going to be really nice to have him. again, this is the first time I'm changing my mind in the entire saga. I think Pittsburgh is going to land Brandon Ayuk, and I think Omar Khan knows it. I think that's why he's been so all in. If not, then I'm getting completely duped in this whole situation by Omar Khan, and I just will not understand why he made no attempts to get anybody else if he doesn't know for a fact Ayuk's going to be a Steeler. That's kind of what I'm hanging my hat on. That's why I'm changing my mind on this whole thing. The combination of absolutely zero activity from Omar Khan and the frustrations that I saw coming out of John Lynch, the fact that Ayuk blatantly spit in the face of the 49ers organization by not showing up to that practice yesterday. This is the first time I've kind of felt like all of the pieces are starting to hit and fit together in the Steelers' favor. Let me know what you think, because this has been discussed ad nauseum. I apologize that I am now feeding into it, much like everyone else, but this just felt like a moment where you have to talk about it. It's too much going on and too much excitement from this fan base not to talk about this right now. So I felt like I had to talk about it. I owed somebody to talk about this. I want the fan base to give me their thoughts and your opinions as to whether you think I'm right. Do you think I'm looking too far into this thing? Do you think I'm trying to read tea leaves that really aren't there? Am I trying to add 2 + 2 and getting 5 in this thing, or is the answer really 4? And as always, if you like the content, please throw a like, share, and subscribe. Thank you all for listening. Have a great day.